Hi, I'm Greg Dell, joined by attorney Cesar Gavidia. And Cesar, let's talk about Northwestern Mutual Disability Insurance Company. We've handled hundreds, if not thousands, of claims with them, especially over your career. You're seeing them almost on a daily basis, if not weekly. I find that with Northwestern Mutual, while they do have group disability coverage, more often than not, it's individual disability policies. So we're going to talk about our experience in handling these claims against Northwestern Mutual, but I want to start off with, to give people some reference points here about the reasons that we commonly see Northwestern Mutual deny claims. So what's the most common reason that you see for a Northwestern Mutual denial?
So, Greg, you mentioned that most of their insurance policies are individual disability policies, so policies that are sold to professionals or individuals that might have very specific types of occupations or specialty types of occupations. You look at the physicians, lawyers, engineers, all sorts of different professionals and people in specialties. When they sell these policies, generally the policy defines total disability as being unable to perform one's own specialty, the substantial material duties of their own occupation. But there's also a qualifier there that they can't be gainfully employed. There's a initial period that they may be covered in their own occupation and can be gainfully employed in another occupation, but oftentimes they have to buy up for that, for that type of specialty coverage, right? Otherwise, they can't be in any sort of other employment and also recovering benefits in their under their disability policy. So oftentimes a reason for denial may be tied specifically to they're just not meeting the definition of total disability under the policy. They may do a medical review of the file. Their physician reviewers and consultants find that the records that they've reviewed don't substantiate or don't support that the person is totally disabled from their occupation. And sometimes that initial period sneaks up on the person and they may be gainfully employed or doing something that's bringing in some maybe minuscule or negligible amount of income, and then they suddenly find themselves denied because the Northwestern Mutual says, well, now you're gainfully employed, so you're no longer qualifying for total disability. Oh, and also you don't meet the definition of disability because our physicians and our experts don't feel that you qualify medically.
So there are some disputes out there, if you search on the internet, about whether or not Northwestern Mutual has a true own occupation definition of disability, and I think that's what you're talking about here, is to say you may have been sold a policy that says, look, if you can't do your job, you're going to get paid. But in some cases, depending upon the type of provision that you bought from Northwestern, it may be, yes, you have to be unable to do your job, but if you do another job, then that income is going to be counted against the money that you could get from this Northwestern policy, and it may wipe out or offset the monthly benefit that Northwestern is going to give you. So, so one scenario for denial that you just said was talking about not having the right medical support. And often I'll see from Northwestern Mutual where they will say specifically, your subjective complaints are not supported by the objective medical evidence. Now, Northwestern is not a policy, usually from what I see, that requires objective evidence of disability. However, doctors use as a technique to deny claims, and when I say doctors, it's not necessarily an in-house doctor employed by Northwestern Mutual. It's an outside doctor that they'll commonly hire to do a medical review, and that doctor will say, you're complaining of back pain as an example, but you're not showing any nerve root or spinal cord impingement. Therefore, the numbness that you're complaining about running down your leg is inconsistent with your complaints. So how do you deal with that in these cases? Does there have to be this exact correlation?
That's complicated, right? Because the objective findings, the MRIs, the X-rays, the scans that one has often, doesn't necessarily correlate with the subjective complaints. Someone may be experiencing a lot of concerning and uncomfortable and painful symptoms, and the doctors, the neurologists might look at the scans and say, well, this does not look like it's, would result in this type of elevation of pain or this type of description of pain that they're, so that's what they mean by the objective findings aren't correlating to the subjective complaints. And you gave the example of like nerve cord, spinal cord impingement or nerve root impingement. And I've seen a lot of cases where we see documented in the actual MRI findings in the scans that the person has severe facet arthrosis. And I think one of the challenges is that you see many of these, the neurologists who are reviewing these scans, and then I'm speaking about the claimant's own physicians, they're seeing such a broad spectrum of patients, people with really severe findings and people with maybe not so severe findings, and then obviously a lot in the middle. And they may look at something like that and not find that to be a significant finding, even though the actual scans say it's severe or say it's significant. And so I think when, oftentimes with Northwestern Mutual, I think they'll reach out to the claimant's own physicians directly, and they'll have a doctor-to-doctor call, and part of that call usually may result in that physician saying, well, I don't see, based on the review of the records, based on these scans, that there's anything that would keep them from working or keep them from engaging in their occupation or working. Usually they just say working because they're not even really all that familiar with what the claimant or what the patient does for a living or what their specialty requires.
And that's challenging. It's good that Northwestern reaches out to the doctor, but then that gets into the patient educating their doctor to say, hey, look, I have a disability claim, which the doctor may or may not know. Then if the doctor does know, this is not a Social Security disability policy. This is protecting my inability to do my job that I was doing. So that doctor has to know what the job is and what the duties of that job is. The other thing, though, when we talk about this objective evidence not matching the subjective complaints, you and I have represented tons of doctors, have friends who are doctors. While we didn't go to med school, we know a lot about medicine. But I do know from speaking to many, many of my friends that are doctors that one of the first things they teach you when you're at medical school, like week one, is you treat the patient, you don't treat the chart. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that you have to listen to the symptoms of the patient. Medicine is a science. It's not an exact science. But when it comes to disability claims, unfortunately, disability insurance companies are notorious for making it as if it is an exact science. And the reason they'll do that is because they'll say, well, the literature suggests that if you have this complaint, then you should have this finding on an MRI, or you should have this finding in blood work. But the real reality of the world is that when you talk to these doctors, whether they're orthopedics, they're neurologists, physiatrists, whatever type of medical specialty they are, you know that 85% of their clients that come in, they can't figure out why they're having the symptoms that they're having, but they treat them, even though objectively they're not showing what it is. And so that's the norm, is to not know exactly what's causing someone's symptoms. And then many of our clients and people worldwide have a condition, they figure out what it is, but they still can't get the symptoms under control. And that's the sad reality of where I say forensic, meaning the evidence that a claimant needs to present, meets the reality of the real world of someone has real complaints. And Northwestern Mutual will say, we don't dispute your complaints, but you're not meeting the burden of what this written policy language says in order to support you getting paid. And that's where you have to have, a lawyer come in and battle for you and say, it's not reasonable, Northwestern Mutual, for you to do that. Or if this case goes to trial, which most of these, or if we get in front of a jury, with these individual disability insurance claims, no reasonable jury who's supposed to be a panel of your peers, which it most likely will not be, but it's still a human being who probably doesn't love insurance companies, is going to look at that still from whatever their background and experience is and say, yeah, it's not reasonable that Northwestern Mutual is saying this person could work with that particular medical condition that they have. But when we talk about denials, because of the fact that there is this subjectivity in reporting what your complaints are, how does Northwestern Mutual go about trying to prove that someone is not being honest about their complaints or maybe is exaggerating their complaints?
Well, from a medical standpoint, they might send that individual to an independent medical exam. All right, so an independent medical exam is where they send the insured to a physician that they've selected or that their vendor that they have selects in usually the medical specialty or area which may be relevant to the disability claim you've made. Maybe several doctors, depending on the claim. And this doctor, and people need to understand, this doctor's not there to provide them with any assistance or provide them with any sort of diagnosis or treatment plan or help them really in any way. They're there working for the insurance company, okay, and there to answer very specific questions that the insurance company is going to have about your medical condition and about your complaints and your limitations and restrictions. And all of that really is geared towards the question because they've already got doubts in their minds about the legitimacy or the whether your disability claim should be paid. That's why they're sending you there. So usually that examination is intended to really already support the predetermined findings they have.
Right.
And it's a bit dangerous. Now the problem, not really the problem, but the reality is that the policy language and the law, I think probably across the country, is that you can't refuse to attend an independent medical exam. Because refusal and saying, I'm not going, I'm not attending, could result in an actual validity or valid reason for Northwestern Mutual to deny the claim.
Right, from a legal standpoint, called a breach of a condition precedent coverage.
Right.
The other thing, Caesar, that we see that Northwestern Mutual and all the disability insurance companies will use is both video and social media surveillance. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people contact us or hear that, can Northwestern Mutual go out and have me videotaped? And they absolutely can. They can follow you around. They'll hire a private investigator to follow you for 1 day, up to a week, every day, any hour. And they want to see your activities, and they want to see if what you're telling your doctors or what you're telling Northwestern Mutual in your claimant statements is inconsistent with what they're visually observing. I often wish that disability insurance companies like Northwestern, sometimes they'll want to do a field interview and they'll get you on the phone, or maybe they'll send someone to visit the claimant. But I often feel like, wouldn't it be nice if they sent someone for a week? Because you can have good days and bad days, and maybe you're having a couple hours where it's okay. But Northwestern Mutual and all of these companies just get this random snapshot where they try to get this gotcha moment where someone maybe went to Home Depot and went and got a hose because they needed one, and they're bringing out the cart and they put the hose in the car in the car one time, and that all of a sudden becomes, oh yeah, you can lift 20 pounds because you went one time to the store and lifted the hose, or they see you go out for an hour to go to Costco or whatever it is. But what they don't see is what was going on in the house for the next 4 or 5 hours, or the entire night that you didn't leave. How many pain meds did you take that night? How much Advil or Tylenol, or how many drinks did you take that night to get yourself to, whatever it took for you to get out of your pain, or what couldn't you do in the house? And then, the next day. So these videos are also just a snapshot in time, but they don't tell the whole story of trying to go back and work 5 days a week, 40 hours, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, where the employer is going to be like, hey, it's 9:15, where are you? Or why are you looking like you're sleeping at your desk at 11:30 in the afternoon? Or why are you so slow to respond? Or why did you not follow up? Because you're in pain, because I can't handle the multitasking, I can't focus, I can't get done. Why'd you cancel the meeting in the afternoon? Those are all the things that start to happen that aren't seen, on the surveillance. So, this is just a summary of the multiple reasons. We've seen them all. They come in so many different types of methods, but if someone's out there who has a Northwestern Mutual disability claim, feel free to reach out to Caesar or myself. We ask you to send us a copy of your denial letter. We'll immediately review it, get on the phone with you, give you a free consultation. We'll never charge you any fees or costs unless we're able to recover benefits for you, and we can help you no matter where you live in the country.